Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us for our APR review of the McNair APR based on the 23-24 instructions. I have with me Lourdes Maria Zavala. I'm Lisa Retamoso with NEC. Just you should be seeing on the screen our shop here, just letting you know not only regarding this free webinar. Oops, I'm moving the wrong screen. We also have some assistance services if you need help with your APR. In addition to this free webinar, if you need additional assistance, we've got that. We've also got some free trial courses there that you might want to check out, in addition to our professional development courses as well. Right. So just want to take a little time to make you all aware of that, our other services as well. But the main reason we're here is to talk about everything and anything regarding the McNair APR. This is being recorded, so you get a chance to look at that later on if you want to look at specific fields. Also, there you should have received a link to the Google Drive that has the resource materials. We have a folder that has the official 23-24 documents, and then another folder, or I think there might be floating around loose, the edited, drafted 24-25 instructions. And Donna has gone ahead and put that in the chat. Donna is with us as well as, and Leah is also here monitoring chat, keeping us on time, all that great stuff. If you have any issues with audio or video, please put your question in the chat. If you have, or let us know via chat. But if you have a question, I'd really love it if you could post it in the Q&A. It's anonymous too, if you want. And also what we do is we're trying to develop a document that we'll upload in the Google Drive that has all the questions and answers, as many as we can there, so you can also access it there in addition to the recording. Let me see. So got that going on, and I'm going to turn it over to Lourdes because we have a lot to talk about. In a second here, Donna's going to launch a poll just to find out how many of y'all are doing this for the first time. We'll probably wait a couple of minutes to see if more people will join. Oh, that's fine. We could, what first APR and what database you're utilizing. And in that, while y'all are answering that, I am going to turn it over to my dear friend that I refer to as Lourdes, that I've known, it seems like forever. We call each other sis because we feel like we're family. You know how Trio does that to us, you know. Can't remember when we first met, but we've always, I feel like I've always known you, Lourdes, and I don't know what I would do without you. The great Maria Lourdes Zavala, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you, Lourdes, for helping us out so much with your expertise in this area.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. And welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm excited to be joining Lisa and Donna and Leah. And this is just a great opportunity for us to come together and talk about this wonderful McNair APR. I've been in Trio for 39 years now. And over those 39 years, I've had an opportunity to work with all of the Trio programs, and also have had an opportunity to build databases for all of the programs, to be engaged in lots of training opportunities, not just with Lisa and the Nosotros Education Center, but also with SAOP, with the Council for Opportunity in Education, at my own institution and our own Trio programs. So I'm excited to be joining you all and getting you all ready. It's going to be a while, of course, before we're ready to submit this, but right now is a great opportunity and a great time for us to be capturing all of the data that we need, because right now, all of it really is readily available now. Lisa and I talk about it. Let's just get this done, get it out of the way so we can continue focusing on the services that we're currently providing to our students, and just kind of sit back and wait for the APR website to go live. I'm excited that we'll be able to get, on board with getting this done right away. Thank you so much. I see the poll. It still hasn't ended yet, but I see that quite a few of us are new. This is the first time submitting the APR. So we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to, ask any questions. We'll talk about, what currently, we can do to get ready. And then just give again more opportunity for you to ask questions. And we're happy to be a resource for you and help you with that process. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And sorry here, let's go back here because I want to share this particular screen. Let me make sure I've got this open up maximum. And
Go
then
ahead,
I'm also
Lourdes.
going to zoom in because I know that we'll have lots of information to share. So let me, Lisa,
Great.
is that good? Or do I need to zoom in a little bit more? Maybe a little
I
bit
right
more?
now I see your
Mhm.
beautiful green forest.
Okay, let me go to the wrong one. I moved
That's
it
fine.
to, there
Let
we
me
go.
tell you,
This one.
the more windows I have, the more what screens. There you go. And
Perfect,
it's a
perfect. There we
PDF.
go.
Awesome. And this is also in your Google Drive, y'all. Okay.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
Donna put in the link. And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring those as Lourdes is presenting. And Lourdes, I'll raise my
Hmm.
hand in
Hmm.
case there's a question that you might
Hmm.
want
Okay.
to answer that you're covering right now. Okay. Or at the
Mhm.
time. Thanks.
Sounds great. Okay, well, good, good. Well, let's go ahead and start thinking about this, the McNair annual performance report. And as you know, we're reporting on the 24-25 annual performance report. And if we were to go out to the Department of Education's website, you'll see that not much information is yet available. We currently do not have a date when the annual performance report will be due. However, if you go out to the site, you'll see that they're currently, accepting the annual performance reports for talent search and EOC. We'll probably work towards upward bound. So my best estimate is that, excuse me, we won't be submitting this APR till in the early spring. So probably maybe January, February-ish. They'll work first on EOC and talent search because we're hoping they're going to be moving towards their grant writing, and then all the other APRs will be, kind of pushbacks a little bit. When we do think about this 24-25 annual performance report, it's important to note that 24-25 is a prior experience assessment year. So we'll be working on trying to get our APRs in to determining whether we're earning 15 prior experience points. So we know that those are critical for us in these refunding processes when we do get ready to write again. Some things that we'll be focusing on in this APR, of course, is to not only report on those 24-25 participants that were served, but also the reporting of prior year participants. Are they continuing to graduate and persist? And then for those individuals who have now had 10 years, whether they have earned a doctoral degree. Because we know that's our focus in the McNair program is to provide services so that we can help our students so that they can get that experience in earning a doctoral degree. So that's something that we'll be reporting on in this 24-25 annual performance report. We'll report on those four objectives, and then we'll report a little bit of information regarding competitive preference priorities. We'll look at that here shortly, the fields of data and what exactly is entailed within our annual performance report. But we know that we have a lot that we're going to report in this particular annual performance report. Some other things that we know that are going to be very important. They're going to be important now, as we're coming out of a shutdown period, and some things that we need to do in order to be prepared once the annual performance report website goes live. And that's identifying new directors, identifying the new certifying officials who will be responsible for submitting and signing off on the APR submissions. So those are some things that you can do now is start ensuring that, and especially if you're new, because I know in the poll you indicated that this is going to be the first time that you're submitting the annual performance report. But if this is the first time you're submitting because you're a new director, then we want to ensure that you have been approved through, the process of getting that approval from your program specialist so that you are noted within the department's database with respect to who are the directors that need to be given permission to log into the APR web tool. So that's going to be important. Also, if you have a new certifying official, it's going to be important for you to identify who that new certifying official is so that they can also get the needed permissions to be able to log into the APR web portal and certify the submission of your APR once the director has submitted the APR. So those are some things that we want to ensure that you're thinking about as you're getting ready for this APR submission. The important point there, of course, is that once that portal goes live, even if you're not ready on that date that the portal goes live, that you log in and that you establish your credentials as the director, and then that you identify who your certifying official is. You do not want to wait until later in the process, once the APR goes live, because sometimes it can take a couple of weeks before your certifying officials and or your directors are approved. It's important to note that you have to submit that APR by the time the APR goes live and by the end date. If you don't, you are no longer in compliance and it'll impact you in lots of different ways. Okay, so you do want to ensure that you're ready and that you submit within the required time frame. Some things that are also going to be important is that you'll get a letter, and oftentimes you'll be notified either by your program specialist, maybe an email message, maybe even from the Council for Opportunity and Education, or even from Lisa to notify you the APR websites are live and that you need to log in. What's also going to be important is that when the APR website goes live, there will be a letter that comes from the Department of Education, and it'll indicate a few of these points that are noted here, but it'll also point out how long do you have to get your APR, and also how many days. One thing that we've seen with the Talent Search and EOC annual performance report is that in the prior annual performance reports, we had 5 business days for the certifying official to sign off on the APR submission. And now we see that that has moved and gone down to 2 business days. So once the APR has been, submitted, you have 2 days to get that certification in. So you'll definitely want to ensure that as you're working with your new certifying officials, and or even maybe just reminding your prior and or your current certifying official that they're aware of this need to log in and submit the APR. So those are just a few tips that you want to ensure that you're thinking about as you're preparing for this APR submission process. We will continue to use trio.ed.gov as the web portal to submit your annual performance report. This particular view right now shows you what's currently been listed. And so you'll see that the Talent Search and EOC annual performance reports are open. The others are closed. And you'll notice that for McNair, it indicates the TBD, to be determined. And so again, we're anticipating that it's probably going to be sometime in January that we might hear that the website will be open and when the APR will be required to be submitted. Below this particular view at trio.ed.gov, you'll also see some links that are going to provide you with helpful links to the instructions. As Lisa mentioned, we've provided for you the instructions, but what we've done is taken the 23-24 annual performance report and modified it. So we've tweaked it to indicate that this is the 24-25, what we're expecting to be modified for the APR. So please take a look at those instructions. However, once the APR website goes live, you'll definitely want to download the actual instructions. In the event that there are any changes and or anything that that we haven't anticipated yet. When you do log into the trio.ed.gov website, the individual submitting the APR will click on login. Now, the login will require a link to the login.gov, and the director and the certifying official and the data entry person, if someone is designated as a data entry person, will need to have a login.gov account. So if you're new and this is the first time that you're submitting the APR, right now you can go out to login.gov and establish your credentials. When you establish your credentials, it's going to ask you to also identify a way that you can set up your Duo authentication so that you can log in through this login.gov account. Once you have signed into login.gov, then it will bring you back to the TRIO portal where you can identify your annual performance report and then proceed with the APR submission process. So again, some things that you can do now is, if you have not yet, is create your login.gov. If you already have a login.gov, is just go back and make sure that your passwords are up to date and that you can continue to get into the login.gov account. When the APR website goes live and you are updated in the database for the department, it makes an automatic link to your credentials to your annual performance report. And so that's why when you do, and after you've logged in to login.gov, that's why you're able to go back in and now finally submit your APR, and identifying you as a director and or the data entry person. So again, you want to ensure that you go in to login.gov via the trio.ed.gov portal to submit your annual performance report. Okay, those are some additional points that will also be noted in the letter that gets provided by the program, by the Department of Education at that link when you click on the instructions. You'll definitely want to read those carefully once they are published. Today, if you go out to the TRIO programs or the Department of Education homepage, no information is being provided or links to the annual performance report because those have not yet been posted and or updated. Okay? But you definitely want to begin probably in January, start visiting and frequenting that particular site so that you can see if anything gets posted. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about the annual performance report and what it is that we typically see when we log into the TRIO web portal. For those of you who are new, when you do log in, after you've created your credentials, you'll log in and there will be 4 tabs. The 4 tabs will provide ways that you can submit your annual performance report and so that you can also review at any time the APR submission process. The first 2 tabs are really the tabs that allow us to submit the annual performance report because there's 2 sections of the McNair annual performance report. The first section is project identification and warning, and there are actually 3 parts to this section 1. So we'll go ahead and go back through these sections. And then section 2 is the Excel file that you will create. You'll use your databases, and thank you for the question too in the poll. Lisa identified that some of you are using Blumen, some are using Lakai, others are using Student Access or Excel to capture the information for your program participants. And you're using this particular tool to create an Excel file, which in section 2, you will upload in the web portal, and it will begin to be reviewed through the portal and will then eventually be used to determine whether you have met the number funded to serve and whether you have met your goals and objectives. And then eventually, whether you have earned prior experience points. So those are some things that are going to be used in sections 1 and in section 2. The third tab that you will see when you log in is your standardized objectives. So this is just an opportunity for you to review what your percentages were. It's pre-populated from your program profile and is being used to measure the outcome for your objectives and therefore in awarding prior experience points. The very last tab in the APR web portal is the review and submission process. This process and this final tab in the APR website allows you to review the progress of your data, this particular Excel file that you uploaded, and to review where you were at with regards to the number served, your objectives, and identifying whether you earn prior experience points. So that's really where the majority of the work is done once your Excel file has been uploaded and accepted in the web portal. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at section one. So section one, part one, is the project identification and characteristics. Here, in this particular view, we're looking at the form. What are the questions that are going to be asked of you to respond to in the web portal? So this one, is of course just, a Word document to show you, what you're going to be asked. But in the APR web portal, it's going to look more like a form. You're going to go ahead and just respond to these particular questions. You'll notice on my left that a lot of the information regarding your project is going to be pre-populated. So it's going to include your PO number. It's going to include information regarding your institution, the institutional post-secondary education data system unit ID number is going to be pre-populated. But then there are going to be other questions, for example, on the right-hand side that want you to enter information regarding, who is the data entry person. In most cases, the project director information is going to be pre-populated. However, the data entry person is not. It's important to note that when you're filling out the information for the data entry person, if you do not have another individual that is going to be assisting with the APR submission process, then the project director should be entered twice because it is a required field. So in the web portal. That just means that the director will most likely receive 2 notifications to indicate that this is where you're at in the submission process. If there is a data entry person entered, then that person will go ahead and get notification of where the APR submission process is. So there are definitely some questions that when you view this particular form in the web portal, that some of it, again, will be pre-populated and others will require for you to enter some information. What is important to note is that this particular section, part one, also includes the certification. So the certification is the signature by the director and the certifying official that the annual performance report was submitted and to the best information and acknowledgement by both individuals that the information that is provided in the annual performance report is readily verifiable, meaning that if you were ever audited and any questions arose from information that you submitted in this annual performance report, that you have documentation to support what you have reported, that it is to the best of your knowledge, accurate and complete. So you'll also notice that included within this certification is warnings, meaning that if you knowingly make a false statement or misrepresentation, that you're subject to fines, penalties, imprisonment, or both. If you think about this particular process, this is a form. In prior years, we used to have to, get the signatures and we would scan it and upload it. However, we are no longer doing that. Last year in the APR submission process, we were required to click on a form and acknowledge this particular certification and warning. And that was done last year, and they're going to continue to implement that in the APR submission process this year. So if you think about what that might look like, is this particular view is a little bit more helpful, because in the web portal, you'll see that you have a couple of different opportunities here. You can, generate the PDF, which is the document that will show you. Here's includes section one. It includes some responses to section to the other parts of section one, and then also summarizes the information from the Excel file that you uploaded. It also provides an opportunity for you to review your prior experience points. If after reviewing this particular PDF, and you decide, you know what, I don't want to hit submit yet, then you can go back through those various tabs. For example, you can go back to section 2 and edit your document, edit your records. You can search for particular records and you can edit the information. That's particularly important because, again, this is a prior experience here. Now, I know that some of you mentioned you're using Blumen, Lakai, Student Access, and Excel, but one thing that I feel really strongly about is before you submit your annual performance report, that you already know, did I meet my number funded to serve? Did I meet my objectives? Should I earn prior experience points, and how many prior experience points did I earn? And that this annual performance report submission is just a confirmation and validation of what you already knew. If you're in agreement after previewing your PDF that yes, it is the annual performance report, it is, true and correct to the best of my knowledge, and also it's ready to be submitted, and it has prior experience points, and I'm good with it to go. You can then go ahead and click on submit. And then once you do submit, then you want to ensure that you download again the PDF that is now your final document, and that you also take an opportunity to download the data. When you do submit your Excel file to the Department of Education, many of your students have already been assigned a case number. However, any new students that you served in 24-25 will be uploaded in your Excel file without a case number. When you click on this particular link for download data, your new students that you recruited and reported on in this 24-25 annual performance report will now have a case number. You'll notice down at the bottom that you will then have the director will have an opportunity to certify. Again, to the best of my knowledge, the information I'm providing is true and correct and is readily verifiable. So you'll have to click on this little check mark here in this little box, and then down at the bottom, you will click on approve to submit the annual performance report. Once the annual performance report is submitted by the director, then and it could also potentially be submitted by the data entry user. Once that APR is submitted, you know what? I take that back. It does need to be submitted by the director because that's the director's certification. So the data entry user should not certify and or approve. Okay, so that should be done by the director. I apologize, my mind went somewhere else with that data entry user. But yes, only the director and the certifying officials should certify and approve the APR submission process. Okay, so once this is done by the director, that will forward a message on to the certifying official to let them know that they need to sign in through trio.ed.gov, go through the login.gov, authentication, and then log in to this annual performance report. The certifying official will open up the APR at this particular point and can then view the data, the PDF report, and can certify and approve. Just a reminder that has to be completed within 2 days. And it has to happen before the APR submission deadline date. Okay, so that's something that you want to ensure is being completed before the APR is you know, because what typically could happen is the APR website is then taken down, and then you don't have an opportunity to go in and and certify the submission of these annual performance reports. Okay? So this is how the signature is going to be provided through this section 1 and part 1 of the annual performance report at the conclusion of the APR website. Okay, so that's part 1. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next part. And I apologize because I hit page down, but I need to go down here. Part 2, section 1, part 2 of the annual performance report is requesting for project directors to provide information on the number of participants who received the required services and the permissible services. It's important to note that the numbers that you provide within the required services and permissible services do not exceed the number of students that you served in the 24-25 reporting period. Okay. Remember, when we were talking about the McNair program, we talked about how the McNair program is really about providing services to our participants to help them prepare for doctoral students. And so we need to ensure that we are providing those required services. Not every one of our students will complete those required services. We just need to ensure that we've provided those required services. So in the required services, we want to identify the number of students that engaged in research or other scholarly activities. In summer internships, seminars, tutoring, assistance in securing admissions to graduate school, and assistance in securing financial aid to graduate school. So many of us do provide those services. We just need to report on how many of those students actually received those services. And again, that we have documentation within our participant files to identify when those students received these required services. We will also identify those number of individuals that receive those permissible services, education or counseling to improve financial and economic literacy, mentoring, exposure to cultural events and academic programs, and other services. So again, ensure and use your project databases that you have documentation of those students that engaged in these services, and ensure that, again, that you do not exceed the number of students that you were funded to serve. Let's go ahead and look at the next part of section 1. In part 3, you'll identify and respond to the competitive preference priorities. In most cases, the majority of our McNair programs did, write for the competitive preference priorities. We wouldn't have been very competitive in the process if we didn't. So the majority, again, did address them. However, if you didn't, you don't have to respond to these. But again, we know that the majority did respond to these. So in section 1A, you would identify if you were a minority serving institution and you implemented particular services that you identified within your logic model in your grant submission, what type of institution, a minority serving institution, were you? And so you would respond to this as needed. In the next CPP, you would want to identify some of those activities, how, and most specifically, how you implemented some of those activities that were described within your logic model at your minority serving institution regarding accessing educational resources and opportunities. You'll notice that you have 500 words or less to address this. You may want to look at the annual performance report that was submitted last year, maybe copy and paste it into a Word document so that you can ensure you're looking at those so that you're looking at, the word count so that you don't exceed this 500 words. So they want to know, but they don't want to know, right? Because they're only giving you 500 words to be able to describe these activities. The last thing that you want to report on in the competitive preference priorities are some of the key components in your project logic model and how these informed, some of the services that you provided and how these were used to engage your program participants so that you could improve the outcomes. Again, a suggestion to go back and take a look at, what you wrote last year, also what you may have engaged in this 24, 25 reporting period, and then go ahead and describe those here. Again, posting it maybe in Word so that you can look at your word count and then copying and paste it here. So there is really within this particular document, really the only narrative that you'll provide within the annual performance report, unless there's particular questions. And we'll look at that next within section 2 of the APR. So again, short and sweet. You want to be able to describe those competitive preference priorities. And I don't know, Lisa, given the current environment, you really want to be careful with describing, and Lisa, I don't know, if you'd like to add, recommendations of being careful with what you describe within the competitive preference priorities.
Oh, definitely. I know
Mhm,
that in the past, I've always used the previous PDF answer, or I saved it in Word and I kind of updated
mhm,
as needed. And that would have worked in previous years. But this year, I think you really need to take your response from the year before and, of course, update it to match what you
mhm,
actually did. They don't want to
mhm,
know what you planned on doing. They want to know actually what happened in 24,
mhm,
25 regarding the CPPs. But then please take them through another, yeah, check them for any trigger words. Put
mhm,
them through GPT if you want to make sure that they look for anything that might be going against any of the executive orders before
mhm,
you post it here. So, yes, I
mhm.
agree. And Lourdes, we did have some clients that were not eligible to even apply for the first
Mhm,
CPP.
yeah.
So, a lot of folks, half and half,
Mhm,
we're
mhm,
not able
mhm,
to do that part. But
mhm,
definitely, you want to take a little extra time to tweak and make
mhm,
sure your responses do not contain any of the trigger words. Okay. But thank
mhm.
you, Lourdes.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, definitely something that you want to be careful about, right? In responding to these competitive preference priorities. So let's go ahead and continue looking at now section 2. Okay. So section 2, as we mentioned, is an opportunity for you to use your current tool. You'll use your database again to capture information about your program participants and to really tell that story through numbers. I like to look at that Excel file as, each column has a column header that we have to make sure that we use, and we find that within this record structure. And for many of you who are using, for example, Blumen and Student Access and Lakai, in most cases, they've created that structure for you, right? They've given the fields the database column name that's required. And then if you're using your Excel file, you've used also this structure to ensure that you're using and giving the names the appropriate column names. Because in order for your file that you're creating using your database and or your Excel, this particular file has to be accepted by the portal. So when you do log in to section 2 of the annual performance report, you can click on section 2, and then there'll be an opportunity to click on getting started. And getting started will take you to another kind of like another link that says, what do you want to do? Well, I want to ensure that my file that I'm creating is, um, you know, for a link for me to browse, maybe to my computer or my network server to find this Excel file that's now been either exported from your Blue Moon or Lakai or Student Access or your Excel file. and that you have an opportunity to upload that. So the database will, excuse me, the Excel file that you create will really go through two processes of being accepted. The first one is to accept whether you have everybody that you're required to report on, and secondly, whether you have, kept all those records intact with respect to, when you reported somebody, for example, in a particular cohort, and or if the case number has been tweaked and somebody might be missing. So once it's actually and initially submitted, it goes through that first process. And then if it's accepted, then it will go through another review process where it will begin looking at, any conflicts or anything that you share within this Excel file that just doesn't quite make sense. So we'll take a look at that here in just a bit. I did forget to mention earlier that one of the additional reasons that you want to make sure that you log into the annual performance website once it goes live is so that you can download your Excel file from the 23-24 reporting period, and it will include a list of those participants that you must report on. All of those individuals are in that initial review, are checked to make sure that you've reported on all those individuals. So if you think about this process and that particular file that you've downloaded from the APR website, and this new file that you'll be submitting for 24-25 is that everybody on that 23-24 file, plus any new participants served in 24-25, should be on this Excel file for 24-25 in order for the file to be accepted. Okay, so that's just another tip. Make sure that once the APR website goes live, that you log in and download the 23-24 file. Okay, so that will save you a whole lot of heartache. Let me tell you, because if it's not initially accepted, you cannot continue with the APR submission until that file is accepted. Okay, so and especially if this is the first time you're submitting the annual performance report, it can be very overwhelming if you're trying to figure out, like, why isn't this file being accepted? Okay. Something that you'll notice immediately is that the file can be submitted as Excel or as a comma separated value. I said Excel because the majority of us save it in Excel. However, it can be submitted in a comma separated value format. Okay. So again, let's go ahead and take a look at this record structure. The record structure, again, has 48 fields of data. And in this 48 fields of data is really telling that story about each of our participants who've participated in McNair, and identifying, why is it they were selected? What was their eligibility? And then we're also going to respond to some fields of data that are going to identify whether particular groups of individuals form what we call a denominator. And a denominator or a group of individuals who are being assessed for a particular objective. And then from that particular group of individuals or individuals within the denominator, how many of those individuals actually accomplished or helped us achieve a particular goal or objective. And those individuals are identified as the numerator. So we have to think about that a little bit differently when we think about this data. But again, one thing that is very important for you is to understand your database. Use those reports that have been built into your, databases, and run those reports. Again, it's important for you to know, again, what is being generated in my database, and am I meeting these objectives? Because again, when I do and get through this submission process, everything again validates and confirms what I already knew about the data that is being input into my database. So let's go ahead and take a look at this Excel file that we're creating and those columns and this record structure. Okay, again, every column is the data that we're processing for each participant. And then every record within this particular Excel file is a student story. Okay, so the first column for all of our participants is going to be your PR number. So it's going to tie this particular record back to your program. We're also including within the second column the field batch AY 2024. This particular field, batch AY 24, is referring to the data that we're submitting for the 24-25 reporting period. So we want to ensure that they identify this record as reporting the outcomes for 24-25. The next field is, and actually the next few fields of data now begin identifying our participants. You know, who was served in our McNair program? Field number 3 is the case number. I already mentioned that new participants that are uploaded into this annual performance report that were new in 24-25 will be blank. They will get their case number at the conclusion of the APR submission process. Everybody else, however, should have their assigned case number, and you should not change that case number for any reason. The next few fields of data allow us to begin identifying our participants. Field number 4 allows us to identify the student's last name. Field number 5, their first name. Field number 6, their middle initial. 7, their date of birth. It's important to note that when you do submit this annual performance report, that you do not change the last name, the first name, or the date of birth. These are unique fields and should never be changed, even if the student has legally changed their name. You have another field later on that we'll get to where you can identify a name change and or an additional name that you are tracking your participants. However, in these first few fields, you should not change once an individual has been reported. The next few fields of data allow us to provide some demographic information regarding our participants. You'll notice that field number 8 is asking for the student's gender, whether they're male or female. And then the next few fields of data allow us to respond to the student's ethnicity and their race. Field number 9 is asking us whether the participant, with respect to ethnicity, is identified as a Hispanic or a Latino student. You will need to respond using the options 1, 2, or 0. And then if the participant is Hispanic, then you were asked within the next few fields, the race fields, to identify the student's race and or social social criteria of how the student has self-identified. For other participants, you'll also have an opportunity to identify, using information that the participants filled out on their intakes and or their McNair student applications, whether they self-identified as being from any of these particular social groups. So you'll notice 10, American Indian Alaska Native. Field number 11, whether a student identifies as Asian. 12, Black African American or African American. Field number 13, whether they identify as white. And in field number 14, whether they identify as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. So it is important to note that you will use the participants' applications to respond to their race and ethnicity. And it really just gives us an opportunity for the students to self-identify. The next few fields of data, fields number 15, 16, and 17, allow us to respond to the students' selection criteria. And it helps us to ensure that we're in compliance with respect to, serving the number we were funded to serve, while ensuring that we're meeting the program regulations with respect to, assurances that we've indicated that there's a significant number within our student population at our institutions that are both first generation low income and also individuals who were underrepresented in graduate education. So in field number 15, we'll identify whether the participant is low income. In 16, whether they are a first generation college student, and in field number 17, whether the participant is from an underrepresented group in graduate education. The Department of Education will use this particular field in conjunction with another field that we'll get to here in a sec, that it identifies the participant status, and identifying whether we met our number funded to serve, and again, whether we are in compliance, meaning that 2/3 of our participants that are served in the 24-25 reporting period, and whether they were both first generation and or low income, and whether in the 1/3, whether they were from a group underrepresented in graduate education. It's important to note that in field number 17, that we have an option number 3, in that in the event we have an individual that we want, for particular approval, that we need to work with our program specialist to ensure that we are given approval to recruit a participant in the event that they do not meet, the race and ethnicity criteria, before you can serve those individuals, that you do have to get acceptance. Okay, so read the instructions carefully and really understand your regulations well with respect to this 1/3 criteria. Okay, so again, those particular fields are really critical in identifying that we met our program assurances in serving the participants that we indicated we would serve as defined in the regulations. The next few fields of data allow us to respond to the students' post-secondary education experience. In field number 18, when did they first enroll at the institution? Field number 19, did the student participate after high school graduation? Did they attend, not participate, but did they attend a 2-year institution? You would respond accordingly. In field number 20, you would identify when was the participant's date of first project service. So in the 24-25 reporting period, you want to ensure that this particular date is after your program start date. So for most of our McNair programs, October 1 is the date of our program service. And so we need to ensure that the student was served within the reporting period 24-25. There are particular error quality control checks. And if you identify a participant as being a new participant, you need to ensure that you have reported the participant within the reporting period, or you will get an error message. Okay. In field number 21, entering grade level, here you will use your institution's system, to identify how many students credits have they completed, to help identify, what is that student's classification with respect to grade level of when they were first served. So you want to ensure that that you are using that to identify what was the participant's grade level at the time that they were selected to participate in your program. Field 22 is a critical field. It's a critical field, much like the the eligibility field, because again, it's going to identify the number of participants that were served in the reporting period. A participant who is new or coded as part CD equal to 1 is again someone that was new. They were first served by your project in the 24-25 reporting period. A continuing participant is a participant that was served in your prior annual performance report, so in the 23-24, and again now in the 24-25. It could also potentially include someone who is re-entering. So somebody who may have, stopped out 1 year and then come back and is continuing to be served by a program in 24-25. A prior year participant is a participant that was not served. They may still be at your institution. They just were not served by the project in 24-25. And then part CD equal to 4 is a prior year participant who has become deceased. It's important to note that if we have knowledge about a participant, and especially a prior year participant who has become deceased, that we identify that individual as deceased, because deceased individuals are removed from denominators in cases where particular objectives are being assessed, so that they do not negatively impact the outcome or success in meeting a particular objective. So where and when it's known, use the option number 4 to identify an individual if you find out that they've become deceased. Sorry about that. I keep wanting to hit page down and it makes me miss a couple of these participant fields. So the next field, number 23, is enroll CD. In this particular field, we're responding to the student's enrollment status. We know through the regulations that a student, in order to be served by the McNair program, has to be enrolled. So hopefully, if you're identifying a participant as new and continuing, you're also identifying that the participant is enrolled during at least one of the terms, whether it's the fall, spring, or summer terms, that they are enrolled. Okay. And then also for your prior participants, some of them may be enrolled, prior year participants, some of them may be enrolled, some of them may no longer be enrolled. So respond accordingly to the students regarding their participation status field. In field number 24, here for participants that are served in the 24-25 reporting period, you'll want to identify as when was that student engaged in receiving services from your program? Did it happen during the whole year? Did it happen only part of the year, maybe one semester, summer only? Was it the full academic year and summer? So you'll see you have a couple of different options to respond to the student's participation status. You'll also notice that we have a field, number 9, where we would respond to a participant who is prior year participant. Okay? Even though you do have an option here that says unknown, you should know. And so you should try to limit any opportunities to use these unknown fields or responses, okay? Because sometimes they come back and like, well, we have a question, you've indicated that they're enrolled and that they participated, but yet you use unknown. So it kind of raises a question about when that participant may have received program services. Okay. In field 25, in this particular field, you respond to what kinds of funds, were used to provide these services. Was it only your federal money, your McNair funds, or did you have non-federal funds? So did you have institutional funds, for example, that help support some of the services that, address some of those services that your participants needed? You also have an opportunity to respond to not applicable for prior year participants and or unknown. Again, I would try to limit the funding source unknown response because you should know, if you have documentation to support their services, you should be aware of, what type of funds were used to support those services. The next few fields of data allow us to respond to additional academic information regarding our participants. Field 26, was the student, pursuing a major that was STEM related? And so you'll notice that you have various responses here to identify, a STEM major, or option number 3, it was a non-STEM field. The next few fields of data allow us to identify if a participant has earned a bachelor's degree. And if they did earn a bachelor's degree in field number 27, then in field number 28, you'll want to report the bachelor's degree date. It's important to note that some fields, for example, these two fields, have some quality control within the APR reporting tool. If you indicate yes, and you indicate a bachelor's degree date with, for example, a 999 values to indicate that that no bachelor's degree has been earned, then the field will generate an error. And when you go through the APR submission process, the record will come up and it'll say there's an error in fields number 27 and 28 because you indicate, yes, a bachelor's degree was earned, but then in field 28, you indicate the bachelor's degree was earned. So you want to watch for those particular fields because they do rely on responses to some of these fields. The next field that we will respond to is the bachelor's degree cohort. And this is also tied to your responses in 27-28, in that if you indicate they've earned a bachelor's degree, and if they and you reported the degree date, then in which cohort is this student going to be placed? If the student earned their bachelor's within the 24-25 reporting period, then when the APR instructions come out, we'll see that an option number 24 is going to be added to allow us to respond to that the student is now being placed in this 24 cohort, meaning that they earned their bachelor's degree in 24-25. By identifying this particular cohort of 24-25, we are now establishing that 10-year threshold that we're going to continue to report on this particular student so as to give them 10 years to earn a doctoral degree. Once we report a particular cohort, then we cannot change that in future years. We'll also be required to continue to report on those students within all of these annual performance reports that we'll report on for 10 years to identify where is that student and are they continuing to earn their doctoral degrees, knowing that in 10 years is when this particular cohort will eventually be evaluated for doctoral degree attainment. So it's important again that once we've reported a cohort, and you will see that in that Excel file that you downloaded when the APR website goes live, that you will see those reported cohorts. And you'll just continue reporting on their progress. And you cannot change those. For this 24-25, of course, any records that you may have submitted in 23-24 will be updated to now identify any 24-25 individuals and identifying their new cohort. And again, you'll report on them for a really long time until they've been assessed for those 10 years. So you'll also notice that within this particular cohort, we have a couple of different options. 88, meaning that that student, earned their bachelor's degree in a previous reporting period, but we failed to report on them. And that's because, again, we cannot add particular individuals to prior cohorts. The only cohort you'll be able to add students to in this 24-25 is the 24 cohort. Okay. So even if those individuals, if you never included them in a cohort, and you've had to report on them with the value 88, then those particular individuals, even if they earn a doctoral degree, you will never earn credit for it. You'll also notice that you have option 99 to indicate that no first bachelor's degree has been earned yet. So those continuing participants and our new participants that we're continuing to serve, and until they earn their bachelor's degree, they will not be included in a cohort. And so you'll use option 99. So just a reminder that those particular fields are all interrelated. Again, once you indicate a degree, once you indicate their date, then you do have to assign a cohort year. In field number 30, if a participant has earned a bachelor's degree, then you will want to use the main field of study list that's included within the instructions to identify a code to identify their field of study. So I definitely want to, again, refer to the file that is going to be downloaded from the APR web portal with those instructions and those codes. You'll also notice there were some options there to indicate 99. The participant has not yet earned a bachelor's degree. Okay, because remember, we're using these fields of data to indicate this story about these students. In field 31, you'll identify the student's cumulative GPA once they've earned a bachelor's degree. You'll also notice that you have options 999 to indicate that the participant has not yet earned a bachelor's degree. Once you've reported those GPAs, you do not have to update them. So, you can just continue reporting that information. And again, for up to those 10 years, you'll be still reporting those GPAs. The next few fields of data, fields 32, 33, and 34, allow us to respond to another objective with regards to the research and scholarly activities. Again, we keep defining, that's really, at heart of what the heart of McNair program, right, is to prepare these students for doctoral studies. And so here we're ensuring that that we're providing those required services. Sometimes I get that question about, is this a scholarly activity? Is this a research activity? And I think it's for you to always go back to your grant application. What did we define specifically? What were we going to do that was unique to these research and scholarly activities, and that we said we were going to engage students in? We probably would have also included, within our budget to say these are, different allowable expenses that we were going to engage students in to really ensure that these students get that academic preparation, that the preparation that they need to prepare for research in order to successfully complete a doctoral study. Some things that you want to always ensure, though, as you're addressing and thinking about these research and scholarly activities, is that they have to meet all of these criteria. They have to be rigorous, meaning more rigorous than is typically available to students in the classroom setting. They have to have a definitive start and end dates. They have to have appropriate benchmarks for completion, meaning you have created this plan and you said, this is our research and scholarly activities. And these are the things and the specific things that have to be required within a particular time frame, and they are rigorous. And most importantly, that these are also activities that are being conducted under the guidance of an appropriate faculty members. Okay, so if they do not meet all of these criteria, then those are not these intensive research or scholarly activities that you're reporting on. Okay, we do engage in some research that is not, as rigorous. So we engage in all of those activities all the time. We take students, to visit, different graduation centers, but on a very, limited and not as intense as is defined here for these particular activities. So you definitely, again, want to ensure that you review, your plan of operations. What did you define, even maybe in the evaluation section, to say, how do we know we're going to be on track to meeting this particular goal, okay, and objective? So again, refer back to your grant application. So the next, these three fields of data are really, wanting to know to what extent did these participants participate? And if they participated, did they complete all of the components within these activities? So in field 32, research, did they participate? So you'll notice that options 1 and 2 indicate they participated. But the difference is option number 2 is that they participated and they completed. Okay. So in order to meet the particular objective, you have to have either a 1 or a 2 to indicate the denominator of who participated in research. But the completion part of it, the numerator for this particular field, is option number 2. In field number 33, other scholarly activities, here again, options 1 or 2, they participated. But option number 2 indicates they participated and completed. And then in field number 34, they're asking about the McNair research internship. Again, did they participate and did they complete? In assessing this particular objective, they're looking at who participated in each of these 3 fields, and then how many of those did you actually report on completed. So a participant could have completed one of these and still help you meet this objective, okay? But again, they're going to look at your responses because they could have completed all 3 or they could completed one of these 3 in order to meet this particular objective. But the key is, again, is that you've looked at what were those activities that you engaged them in, and did they meet those 4 criteria to be considered a research and scholarly activity. Okay? So you definitely, again, want to go back and take a look at your particular goals and objectives and what you defined within your grant application. The next few fields of data now allow us to respond to a participant's graduate school status. Okay, so once a participant has been identified as earning a bachelor's degree, we will now respond to the fields of data regarding the student's enrollment in graduate programs of study. So in field number 35, you're going to respond to, did the student complete a graduate school admissions test? You'll notice that you have responses of yes and no, and then you have a response, number 99, to indicate it's not applicable because the student has not yet earned a bachelor's degree. And you also have an opportunity to respond with a 0. It's a no. In field number 36, here you'll identify when the student first enrolled in graduate school. You'll also notice you have an opportunity to respond with the 999 value to indicate that the student has not yet enrolled in graduate school. I'm going to go ahead and review a couple more fields, and then I want to respond to something that's really important to understand about the McNair Annual Performance Report. And with respect to the last few fields of data that we've reviewed with respect to earning a bachelor's degree and graduate enrollment. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next field. In field 37, if your participant has enrolled in a graduate program, then in fields number 37, you'll want to include the National Center for Education Statistics website. You'll want to go to this particular website and identify the institutional for post-secondary education data system ID for the institution. Okay, so you'll definitely want to ensure you go out to this College Navigator site and identify the IPEDS number if the student has enrolled in graduate school. In field 38, here, if a student has graduated and they have earned their bachelor's degree within the 24-25 reporting period, then in field 38, you will want to identify whether the student has enrolled in a post-baccalaureate program. Now, this particular field of data is a critical field in addressing, again, the objective where you're measuring enrollment status in respect to graduate school. Okay, so the quality control checks that I mentioned earlier, in that, I mentioned that in the fields where you identified the student earned a bachelor's degree, and they earned a bachelor's degree within this reporting period. And so you identified and gave them the cohort of 24. For those students now, here you're going to respond in field number 38, whether they enrolled in graduate status. So the denominator is all of those students where you have put them into the PSE cohort, the degree attainment cohort of 24. And now in this grad enrollment status field, whether an option number 1 is the numerator to indicate that they did enroll in graduate school. Okay, so again, keep in mind how all of those fields are related to one another. And again, I mention that because if something is not quite right about the story and you're trying to respond to these particular fields of data, then you will get an error message at the APR website. Okay. The next thing, and the next field of data, field number 39, we want to respond to the persistence status. Okay. And so this nuance that I wanted to address with respect to this particular file is that, our usually we want to, when we're thinking about this Excel file, is that we want to immediately tell them that we have a student that they earned their bachelor's degree. We've put them into the 24 cohort. And now in the fall of 25, in field number 38, we want to tell them they're in graduate school. And so we typically want to do that. We want to tell them the institutional code, and we want to give them that IPEDS number to say they're in graduate school in the fall of 25. However, in the McNair annual performance report, we do not report a student's status and enrollment in graduate school until the year they're actually in graduate school. So for our students that, again, just to be clear, because I know that gets a little bit confusing, we said they're in the cohort 24. In field 38 is where we tell them they enrolled in graduate school, and we leave it at that. We don't respond to and give them information regarding the institution because they will not be reported on as a first year status until the 25-26 annual performance report. Okay? So we definitely want to, be careful with that. Okay. So I know it's a little bit, a little bit, kind of squirrely, I want to say, because my intention is always wanting to tell them, well, they're in graduate school. And for the majority of us, we don't report that first year for the fall of 25 until the 25-26 reporting period. Okay. So I know that was kind of wordy, but it will help you if you think about that I don't tell them that till next year. Okay. Field 39 now is helping us to respond to the persistence status. And so now we're looking at students that we would have reported on in 23-24, we would have reported on them as having enrolled in in their graduate program of study in the fall of 24. And so within the 24-25 reporting period, they are now a first year student. And so field number 39 is asking us about those students that are in the 24-25 reporting period as a first year student in graduate program of study, in that what is their status now, thinking about them now in the fall of 25. Are they still enrolled in a post-baccalaureate program? And so this is going to help us now determine whether they've persisted and help us respond to the objective regarding persistence. Okay. So you'll notice that as you look at the field responses that we have available here for this particular field, we can see that for those students who were first year in 24-25, they were a first year graduate student. In the fall, option number one, we're saying they were still enrolled in graduate school in the fall of 25. I mean, they've persisted 1 year. Option number two is that they were no longer enrolled. Option number three is they were no longer enrolled because they had already completed an accelerated graduate program. And then option number four is allowing us to respond to students who were no longer enrolled because the participant had died or had become deceased. Okay. Option number four, again, allows us to remove individuals from the denominator so as not to impact the outcome of this particular objective. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're reading your responses carefully in considering first year students. You'll notice that option number five are for all other students. If the student was not a first year a student that you reported on in 23-24 as having enrolled in graduate school in 24-25, then you will use option number five because they were not a first year student. Okay, so you definitely want to, again, ensure that you're reading these carefully because I know they can get confusing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next field. And again, we're rapidly running out of time here, so I'm going to, we have just a few more fields of data here. In field number 40, if the student was a first year student, then you'll want to report on the student's year of graduate study. Again, use your institutions, to determine, what grade level are they with respect to the number of credits they've completed. And GPAs, if those are required in terms of evaluating their year of study. If a student is enrolled in graduate school, you'll want to use that main field of study list to respond to field 41 to indicate the field of study. If the student is a first year student in 24-25, did the student engage in any type of assistantship, a teaching, a research, other, no assistantship? You'll notice you have option 99 to indicate this was not a first year student and or it's unknown. If for any reason the student has left graduate school, then you'll see in field number 43 that you have different fields of data where you can respond to the reasons that they may have left. In field number 44, this is a critical field. It's a critical field because it's going to be used to determine whether you met the degree attainment, the doctoral degree attainment within the 10 years. You'll notice that you have different options to identify the highest grades, the highest degrees that were earned by your participants. But it is really options number 2, 3, and 4 that will be used to evaluate whether you met this particular objective. Because remember, we're reporting on students and whether they have earned doctorates that were research intensive. So again, those are options 2, 3, and 4. In field 45, if the participant has earned the highest degree, you'll want to ensure that you provide the date. And you'll also notice you have an option 999 to report on those participants who have not earned a graduate degree. In field 46, you'll want to identify the IPEDS number using the College Navigator to identify the institutional code where the student earned their doctorate. And then in fields 47, you'll want to respond to the students in employment once they have earned their doctorate. Are they teaching? Are they engaged in research? Are they engaged in both teaching and research or some other activity? So you'll want to go ahead and respond to their employment activity once they've earned their doctorate. In field number 48, this is the last field of data that we'll respond to. And this is that field of data that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, where you can indicate, this is the additional name that I'm tracking that student. Maybe they had, a name spelling that was incorrect when the record was input into the annual performance report. Maybe they've had a legal name change and or another name that you are tracking them by. This is the only place where you want to ensure you've indicated that. It is not a required field. It is only in the event that you're tracking them using another name. It's important to note that within all of these fields of data that we're not, providing any social security numbers because we've moved beyond using those. Okay. Um, so with that, and that includes the 48 fields of data. Sorry, let me go ahead and take a sip of water.
Yeah, you deserve a drink of water, sip of water. Take your time. We do have a question that I think is something that everyone has been thinking about, and I bet there's been discussion and during the McNair only groupie, meetings that they've had, Lourdes. And I bet at the policy seminar, for those of you going there, I definitely would see what the discussion is regarding, Lourdes, the field about the underrepresented category. Will that negatively affect our APR given the lawsuit? Can we still use this criteria? Well, again, I would like to say that, and I don't know if you could move it up to that field, Lourdes, on your end when you get a chance, since you're still sharing the screen, if you can move it to the underrepresented, where we answer that. My answer, short answer, was, well, first of all, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lourdes, last I've heard is that it's still in the regulations, it's in the legislation. So they really can't change that. But what they could do, correct me if I'm wrong, field number 17 might not be asked on the APR or asked in a different way. And that's pure speculation. But I know that perhaps it has to be addressed and talked about on the APR would probably be the first time that it's officially talked about. What do you think,
Mhm.
Lourdes?
I agree with you, Lisa, on a couple of things. Is that, you know, we have the regulations, we have the law, right? The Higher Education Act. Nothing has changed with respect to the Higher Education Act. Um, and we also know that, regulatory, we have an assurance that we have signed when we indicated that, we will meet, what is defined within the law and within the regulations. So I don't, think that, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that they would remove that question because it's, with respect to our annual performance report and meeting our assurances. I was more concerned about how we address some of the competitive preference priorities, that we ensure, we're not engaging any particular activities, as you addressed earlier, with, what the administration might see as questionable. And and even at that, we know, that our grants were written and were funded, under the prior administration. And we're just in that area, right, where there's just a lot of gray. Um, and with the government shutdown, we haven't really been given much, feedback and or, you know, from the department with respect to some of these questions that we have. All we can really do is say, these are the things what's in the law, this is what's in the regulations, we're following those. And until the department comes back and gives any guidance, that we're going to hold to what our agreement is. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so,
And
um,
that's what I put in the short
mhm,
answer.
mhm,
Um, I said it's still the regulations. We need to
mhm,
see how or if this question is going to make the cut, or maybe they
mhm,
ask it a
yeah,
different
mhm,
way,
mhm,
or say per previous legislation or per current
yeah,
legislation. Please note, I don't know, a
mhm,
disclaimer or whatever.
mhm,
But remember, right now we are sharing with you the official structure for the 23-24 APR,
mhm,
and we're using it as a guide to
mhm,
get us going right now. Right now is
mhm,
the time to get
mhm,
this report done as fast as you can, I think. Right before, I
mhm,
mean, you should have
mhm,
all the answers to all the questions at this point. So don't
Yeah.
wait for the APR to become live. Go ahead and do
Mhm.
it now.
Mhm.
And if you're going to take that mindset, then you're going to have to utilize basically the 23-24 instructions as is.
Mhm.
Yes, Lourdes has put in some years. She's changed the years to kind of help make it easier for y'all to be in the right mindset, so to speak.
Mhm.
But keep in mind that it's not the official 2024-25
Mhm.
report.
Mhm.
I doubt there's going to be a lot of change, but there could be some change. So you want to
Mhm.
make sure that you be prepared to look at that and follow that. But this here
Mhm.
is not the official, right? This is
Mhm.
just a
No, this is
draft.
not a good. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're kind of
And,
speculating off of history, right?
yeah. And you also, we highlighted in red. So anything that was changed, I put it in red so that you could see, this is what we anticipate. We anticipate that cohort year 24 to be added. Um, but as Lisa said, there has been no change in the Higher Education Act. It's not been reauthorized. Sometimes if there are changes, sometimes they will publish, but I doubt they're going to publish any APR changes. Um, and as Lisa suggested, once the APR website goes live, log in immediately to download the instructions, to download that letter, that I mentioned some things that we might see some edits on. Um, but other than that, I think, the gender, I mean, has now been changed to sex CD, right? Whereas before it was gender and it had, other options. So
Right.
and that's why, I wasn't anticipating major changes at all to this APR. So,
We do have one question, another question. If we have a student earning their PhD in December of 2025, okay,
uh-huh,
so right now, this month, will
uh-huh.
it allow us to enter it on the 24-25 APR? I think I know the answer to this question, or will it
No,
error out? This is the
no.
10-year mark for the
Uh-huh.
objective.
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? Because they're looking at the degree attainment. When are these particular degrees earned? And so if we think about this, hold on just a quick second. So they're going to look for, of course, they're going to look for the cohort 14, because that's the 24-25 cohort would now have 10 years, right? And so they're going to look for the date. So let me just quickly go through
What
here.
field is that on the
That's the degree CD. It's the
yeah, it's down there.
yeah. Yeah, so they are looking at by the end of October-ish, because it kind of, and one thing, I forgot to mention, Lisa, is that you follow the academic period. That it's because some terms sometimes begin in the fall and in August, sometimes September. But they're really looking at, when were degrees obtained by the end of the reporting period, which was which would be September 30th of 2025. And so
Mhm,
that December date falls right outside of it, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
so it may not count that particular degree. And
Right,
so
because it ends, yeah,
mhm,
it's on
mhm,
that, it's past. So that
yep,
would be the answer to that question, unfortunately.
mhm, yeah,
Uh, and yeah, that's unfortunate that they just missed that 10-year
mhm,
window by less than a semester, the way it's set up. And
mhm,
Lourdes is right. I
mhm,
want y'all to realize that on the instructions, on page
mhm,
one of the instructions,
mhm,
or close to it, it tells you when your APR
mhm,
reporting period starts.
mhm,
And on section one, Lourdes, it will ask what was the
mhm,
first day of classes. Um,
yes, mhm,
at your
mhm,
college, what was
mhm,
it fall of 2024? What was the first day of classes?
mhm, yep,
So you
yeah.
see, they're going to go based off of that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Remember, there's quality control checks. I did want to also respond to on and it's sometimes we might have a student, right, for example, that may have graduated in the fall. They earned their bachelor's degree in the fall, and maybe they started the graduate program in the spring. So sometimes you can, it's a little bit squirrely in terms of how you respond. But the things that you want to ensure of is those dates when you provide a date, right? that the date runs, kind of that story. So, for example, if I indicate that the student earned a bachelor's degree in 24-25, then I'm going to indicate bachelor's degree as a one. I'm going to indicate, a date within the reporting period 24-25, and it would probably coincide with the fall semester of 24. And then I would indicate that they've earned their cohort in cohort 24. I would, put the field of study, enter the GPA. And then if I wanted to report for that student, for example, that they enrolled in graduate school in the spring, then I want to make sure that I give a date that is after the date of that they earned the bachelor's degree, that happened after that, right? When they entered in graduate school. So I can report both of those things as a student being a first year in 24-25. If this particular example happened to them, they graduated in the fall with a bachelor's, earned graduate school, and within the 24-25 were also a first year student. Okay,
Mhm.
so we have very few students that report in that, but it is possible to report that in the APR. But you have to be careful of those dates. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Dates matter,
Yeah, the dates matter. So remember, you're
you know.
telling a story about this particular student. I think the other thing probably I want to mention is that, I talked about students that, that they get removed, that they become deceased, that they don't impact the outcome of your objectives. But I think I also want to mention that if, however, in the determining this last objective, in the doctoral degree attainment, if the student, for example, earned, if the student, had earned the doctoral degree, um, and and then became deceased, you won't be, you'll get credit for that individual earning the doctoral degree. Okay, even though they became deceased later. Okay. However, if the student was in a particular cohort and became deceased, um, they will be removed from the denominator so as to not impact the doctoral degree attainment objective. Okay, so it's important to note that if they earn that doctoral degree, you get credit for it. Okay, so
Lourdes, thank you
uh,
so very much.
mhm,
You've been so helpful with all our APR webinars. And thank
mhm,
you all out there for joining us. Thanks
mhm,
for hanging out a little bit longer with us. This recording will be ready sometime tomorrow. The link will be put in the follow-up email. Or from Zoom, and also we'll probably ask you to give us a little bit feedback. If you have any questions at all regarding the materials or some questions that may come up later on, you can always email us at info@nosotros edu.org. Lourdes, I don't know if you have any parting words for our folks. I'm going to say Merry Christmas to them and good luck on your APR.
Yeah, thanks again for this opportunity to help you all get ready for the APR. And we'll all just kind of hang there and wait and see if that goes live soon. But I'm again anticipating in January. Lisa,
Mhm.
Donna, and Leah, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you and all the great questions. Thanks again, Lisa, for reviewing those. But
No
I.
problem, Lourdes. Thank you all so much out there in McNair world. And keep an eye. I forgot to mention we have our 12 days of trio going on our blog post. If you are a member, we're giving out gifts every day. Lourdes, policies, procedures, checklists, all that good stuff, free of charge. If you guys want to take it and run with it, make it your own. Or if you want a little bit of help, we can help you out with that too. But that's just our way of giving back to y'all. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you,
Thanks
Lee
again.
and Donna. And y'all have a great rest of your day and a very Merry Christmas.